fluoridation. One of the things that the EPA scientists were able to secure is a supply of bottled water for their offices in Washington, D.C. So even though every citizen in Washington, D.C. is drinking fluoridated tap water, the EPA personnel in their headquarters are drinking bottled water, free of fluoride. We are seeing in this issue, along with other public health issues, a typical behavior of industry. When a report is issued by independent scientists indicating that something causes health problems, whether it's lead in gasoline or solvents or something causes health problems, a few months later, another study will come out with paid scientists paid by the tobacco industry or the chemical industry or the pharmaceutical industry, or somebody will come out with a study which is exactly opposite to that. Now, we had an outrageous example of that fairly recently when there was a furor about the fact that we were injecting, or the CDC was having doctors inject kids with vaccines containing thimerosal. Thimerosal is organic mercury, and it's absolute lunacy to inject into a baby's bloodstream organic mercury, which we know is a powerful neurotoxin. It caused Minamata disease, and the EPA and others are forever trying to regulate mercury emissions from power stations, crematoria, medical waste incinerators, trash incinerators, because of their concern that the mercury will go into the sediments of lakes, be converted into organic mercury, bioconcentrate up the aquatic food chain so that the large fish should not be eaten by pregnant women, because we're concerned about the organic mercury going into the fetus, the newborn baby, into the baby. And yet, here we are injecting organic mercury directly into a baby's bloodstream. Well, obviously, when people found out about that, there was fury. And what happened? A short while ago, they published a study that said, whoops, we think that organic mercury is good for a baby's brain. Absolute poppycock. Utter nonsense. But we've seen the same thing with fluoride. There were studies which shows that fluoride increased hip fracture in the elderly. So they came back with studies which shows that fluoride actually protected the bones against hip fracture. We had a study which shows that osteosarcoma was increasing in fluoridated communities, and they came back with a study which says fluoridated water actually protects against osteosarcoma. That was actually made a front page article in the American Dental Association. Guess what? Do they have a conflict of interest or what? Front page of the American Dental Association. It's quite sickening, and I don't think that fluoridation is necessarily the most important issue. I think I can think of other environmental issues and other health issues which are more important. But this one is as easy as turning off a tap, the spigot in the waterworks. And the other reason why this is an important issue, which goes beyond fluoridation, it is a separation between honest science and public health policy. And that's not healthy. You don't have science when you don't have truth. So the moment someone fudges, someone doesn't tell the truth, they're no longer a scientist. Their degrees should be taken away from them. And the moment you don't have honest science supporting public health policy, you are sowing seeds for a public distrust of the agencies that are protecting our health, protecting the environment. And I, for one, do not look forward to the day when the majority of the public do not trust the health agencies in this country. And if they didn't trust their government, say, oh boy, is this euthanasia? Are they trying to get rid of us? Are they trying to limit the world's population? Are they using this as an excuse? We have to be able to trust our government health agencies. And the longer they persist in this nonsense of putting thimerosal into babies' bloodstream and forcing fluoridated water upon us, less and less trust will be there. Fluoridation emerged in the 1940s. And at that time, there were many industries that were facing lawsuits for fluoride pollution. In fact, in the 1930s, the Department of Agriculture said that fluoride has caused more damage to agriculture than any other pollutant. So many lawsuits were confronted by the aluminum industry, the steel industry, ceramics, brickworks, oil industry, and the nuclear industry, because the Manhattan Project, the development of the nuclear bomb, was taking place in the 40s as part of the World War II effort and then the Cold War. And to extract uranium, you need a huge quantity of fluoride to make uranium hexafluoride, which is a gas which you then can use to separate the isotopes, the lighter isotope from the heavy isotope, the fissionable uranium from the non-fissionable uranium. Huge buildings were used in Oak Ridge, Tennessee to do that. But in the process of generating this uranium hexafluoride, there was a lot of fluoride pollution in the area. And one of the places this pollution took place was in deep water and near the boundary of Delaware and New Jersey. And farmers there had their peach orchards decimated by this fluoride and started legal action. And there was no question that the Manhattan Project was very, very concerned about lawsuits from fluoride pollution. No question at all. They were also concerned about the damage to the concentration behavior of the workers because they suspected it was a neurotoxin. The nuclear industry, the Manhattan Project, was involved in the designing of one of the key trials for fluoridation, the Newburgh-Kingston trial, which went from 1945 to 1955. The chairman of the panel that designed this study was Harold Hodge, who was the chief toxicologist of the Manhattan Project. And the Manhattan Project was collecting the data that they obtained, the health effects on children, or quote, the non-health effects on children, was being collected on a daily basis and sent to Rochester. And Harold Hodge not only was the chief toxicologist of the Manhattan Project, but after 1950 became the #1 toxicologist promoting the idea that fluoridation was completely safe. And there are pictures of him in front of a blackboard, writing on the blackboard, 1 part per million is safe. And we have no reason to delay the fluoridation of the drinking water. And I wonder how many people watching that TV commercial in the 1950s realized that this same man was part of the team that was injecting plutonium into the bloodstream of terminal patients without their knowledge. And some of them weren't even terminal. I mean, such dastardly behavior we associate with the Nazis. But this was done by the team, the Manhattan Project. So those people who think there are no conspiracies in the world, there is a documented conspiracy, a conspiracy to inject into the bloodstream of terminal patients plutonium for the purposes of scientific research. One of the veterinarians who pioneered the study of fluorosis in animals was Dr. Leonard Crook, professor of veterinary medicine at Cornell University. Sadly, he died this year. But before he died, he studied horses that were poisoned in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, the horses of Kathy and Wayne Justice. They have no children, so they poured love and affection on these horses you wouldn't believe. They won 52 awards, medals, ribbons, whatever they give for quarter horses. They won oodles of them. And then, unbeknownst to them, their water was fluoridated in Pagosa Springs. And the horses were drinking the water out of big tanks which were being fed by the municipal water supply. And gradually these horses developed the most dreadful conditions. They were lame, they had colic, which is very serious for a horse. So their whole skin became changed. There were all kinds of bloating and bubbling. And eventually 8 of these horses died. 4 dogs died. And during this whole process, they contacted Leonard Crook who saw the pictures of the bones, the deformed hooves, the teeth, and they sent him bones. They actually dug up a horse, got its bones, sent him the bones. He analyzed them, and he said emphatically, based upon this information, the photographs, the history, and the fluoride measurements, and particularly the fluorosis of the teeth, there was no question that these horses had fluoride poisoning and died from fluoride.
We do not consider dentists and doctors the enemy here. The enemy is the fact that they are not reading the literature. The only crime that they commit is telling the people it's safe and effective when they haven't read the literature. So it's a betrayal of trust from the top down, not from the bottom up. And so the doctors, just as they are betrayed by the American Medical Association, and the dentists are betrayed by the American Dental Association, and both have been betrayed by the Health and Human Services. Those doctors and dentists are betraying us, but they're very much at the end of two chains of command. And many of those bureaucrats in the middle do not challenge policy. If you've ever worked in the bureaucracy, you know to challenge policy is to risk your pension and your promotion and everything else, if you're perceived as a troublemaker. So once these decisions are made at the top, that decision, that policy filters out all across the country to the people that carry it out. Same with the American Waterworks Association and all the water departments. The same with the American Dental Association. That feeds all its way down to all the local dental societies and dentists. So it's the people at the top that need the finger pointed at eventually.
In the 70s, two scientists created a furor. Dr. Dean Burke, who was most famous in biochemistry for the famous Lineweaver-Burke plot, and Dr. John Yamayanis, a biochemist who worked for Chemical Abstracts. They got together and they looked at the cancer figures for 10 fluoridated cities and 10 non-fluoridated cities of a similar demography. And they found there was a higher cancer rates in the fluoridated cities. This generated a huge furor, and there are many attempts to discredit the studies and falsely accuse them of not controlling for age, sex, and so on. Now, what in the end it did was to trigger animal studies. The Congress, having listened to this furor, asked the National Toxicology Program to do animal studies. And eventually in 1990, those animal studies were published. And not only did those animal studies find an increase in bone cancer, osteosarcoma, in the male rats, but also some other cancers, cancer of the liver and other tissues. And then when these went to government peer review, a lot of the cancer cases were taken out, ruled out. And this created considerable consternation from William Marcus, who was the chief toxicologist at the time of the Water Division. And he blew the whistle on this. He circulated memos. What are you doing here? You're downgrading these cancer studies. We've got the guy that discovered one of these cancers looking at the slide and saying, this is this rare cancer, and yet you've said it's not. And they sacked him. They fired him. William Marcus. They fired him. They had to reinstate him a couple of years later when it was shown that he was sacked under false pretenses. But shortly after they found this increase in osteosarcoma in the male rats, they found an increase osteosarcoma rates in the fluoridated communities in the United States compared to the non-fluoridated. And then another study in New Jersey that found the same thing. And then once again, we got the studies coming in which showed that fluoridation protected against osteosarcoma, and other studies that didn't find it. And the story kind of quietened down until 2001, where Elise Basson, a dentist, getting her doctorate at Harvard, did a very well-designed, robust study where she looked at osteosarcoma in young boys as a function of when they were exposed. And she found that when they were exposed to fluoridated water in their 6th, 7th, and 8th years, they had a 5 to 7-fold increased risk of developing osteosarcoma by the age of 20. Very important study.